Cautiously optimistic or stuck in a rut again? What's the real outcome from the latest China U.S. trade talks? And the U.S. is pushing a so-called Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act into law. But on what grounds and what's the bigger picture? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. Before we begin, I would like to announce our new venture, a weekly live stream starting this week called Headline Buster. It's the first ever show on CGTN to bridge the gap between new media and TV. So the show will first go live on social media before being shown on TV at our usual air times. The idea is, as China interacts ever more intensively with the outside world, the foreign media's depiction of China is critical for shaping how you see me and my compatriots. And are you seeing both sides of the coin? Are you being misinformed or even disinformed? So join me for Headline Buster as I dissect stories from around the world to bring you the missing pieces of the China puzzle. It's also worth mentioning that you'll have the chance to interact with me and my guests in real time and have your comments appear on the screen. The live streaming will start on the official page of CGTN on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube and Weibo at 10:30 a.m. Beijing time Friday, every Friday, which is 3:30 a.m. London, 5:30 a.m. Nairobi and 10:30 p.m. Thursday, Washington time. This Friday, our topic will be poverty alleviation, China's crowning achievements. What have you heard about this subject and what do you want to know or ask? Find me on Twitter via the handle ThePointWithAlex and leave me your comments or questions. And now, for tonight's topic, let's go to the discussion. And our first topic is the U.S.-China trade negotiations. Now, the U.S. suspended the hike in tariffs on Chinese goods planned for October after the latest round of trade talks with China wrapped up last Friday in Washington. Both sides said substantial progress was made, but global markets aren't breathing a sigh of relief quite yet. U.S. President Donald Trump announced the two sides reached phase one of a new deal, with the Chinese side confirming that what the U.S. side said is true. And the same thing with our understanding on the agreement. But what exactly was agreed upon and what still needs to be ironed out? Joining me for the discussion in the Beijing studio are Sitao, economist at Deloitte, China, and Einar, Tangen, current affairs commentator. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So as I said, President Trump said on Sunday via tweet that both sides reached a very substantial phase one deal. And let's also hear what the spokesperson of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Geng Shuang, had to say the following day.
What the U.S. said is the actual situation, which is consistent with what we know. There's no difference between the two sides in reaching economic and trade agreement. This agreement will be of great significance to China, the United States, and the world, as well as to trade and peace.
So it seems that the two sides have indeed reached something, but how many details do we know, Sitao?
First of all, I agree with what President Trump said. You know, it's a very good deal, quite substantial. I think actually I'm more than cautiously optimistic for the following reasons. You know, after so many round negotiations, as both sides have become more realistic, I think U.S. has abandoned this approach all for nothing. So you really go for something which is more tangible, low-hanging fruit, reduction of bilateral trade imbalance. Meanwhile, on the China side, financial liberalization actually is gathering momentum. Just of late, you know, the limit for foreign shares in asset management companies actually being removed. So I think this is more than cautiously optimistic.
But how come we're not hearing so many details explained yet?
Well, because
from the United States side or from the Chinese side?
I think you need to compare. For example, well, there will be another meeting in Chile, APEC meeting. I think APEC meeting will be like last year's meeting in Argentina. So there will be something in writing, and of course, at some point we need to deal with more so-called structural issues, but so far, I would say it's more than a ceasefire.
Einar, what is your take on the situation? Do you think we can be more than cautiously optimistic at this moment?
No, I don't think so. I'm going to take the opposing view, not to be on the other side, but quite simply, Mnuchin, the Secretary of Treasury, came out and said there's no deal until until we get what we want, and we need that by December. And they have not said that they're going to lift the December tariffs on there. So there's a lot of questions about this. Remember, Donald Trump is famous for floating trial balloons. He's concerned about looking weak. He promised the American people that he was going to get a comprehensive deal, a deal that was not even possible of being done.
Yeah, what Sitao was saying, basically, okay, after a period of time, both sides realized they can't go for a one for all, you know, they have to take step by step. That's why there is a phase one. Do you think?
No, that's not Donald Trump's style. When has Donald Trump ever retreated? He tends to double down on things. Now, the only thing that's changed is in the last 2 weeks, he's become incredibly weakened by this whole impeachment scenario. They have solid evidence. They're going forward. There seems to be a drip, drip, drip on a daily basis of new allegations. That has moved his timetable up. Remember, earlier on, he was saying, I'm in no hurry. And the conventional thinking was that he would like to have a trade deal in place just prior to the election so that it could help him propel him to the office.
Has the United States side said specifically that this is a phase one deal?
Well, they don't have to say that. Actually, I think media in general have really made this more dramatic. Actually, I think the negotiation and dialogue really just been taking place continuously. But of course, media want to hype this up, 12th round, 13th round. And I think both side realize we need to do something right now. And I give you another piece of information. For example, the 90 days extension on the supply for Huawei, I think that has reflects a more nuanced view on the side of U.S.
I have to apologize here because at the very beginning of the discussion, actually, President Trump, as I said, already tweeted that it was a very substantial phase one deal. So he actually said it that way. And let's read his tweets on agriculture, for instance, more in a detailed fashion. He said, my deal with China is that they will immediately start buying very large quantities of our agricultural product, not wait until the deal is signed over the next 3 or 4 weeks. The deal I just made with China is by far the greatest and biggest deal ever made for our great patriot farmers in the history of our country. In fact, there is a question as to whether or not this much product can be produced. Our farmers will figure it out. Thank you, China. So there he seems to be just highlighting the agricultural part of it.
Yes, but let's look at those numbers, all right? At the height of trade a few years ago, when China was buying quite a bit of agricultural product, it was 25 billion. So I don't know how you go for, he's saying 40 or 50 billion.
Yeah.
Well, of course, there's no way they can produce that. I mean, crops go into the ground. There's only so much that comes out unless you've planted more. So this is just hyperbole. Once again, this is Donald Trump trying to appeal to his base, trying to look strong so that he can get this deal through.
And
but he's just trying to change the narrative. And the fact that we're talking about this instead of the impeachment shows that he's right.
Could there be the risk that he's selling the pie before having it? I mean, there's no
that's not
risk.
the risk. The
it's
risk
not
is,
the risk
well,
because the Chinese side hasn't,
yeah.
specified any details.
He's done this before. How many times do we have to go back in history?
President Trump says 40 to 50 billion, but the Chinese side only said how much they have already bought. But the Chinese didn't say, they only say we will continue to buy more American agricultural goods without specifying any numbers.
So on agriculture, that's something very tangible. Right? I mean, if you track the Chinese economy right now, we actually have a period inflation. So there's the incentive for China to increase the purchase of agriculture. Now, the bad news, there will be bad news. Bad news is U.S. Let me finish. Sorry, let me finish. The bad news is if China and the United States are getting into so-called managed trade, which is what U.S. and Japan did many, many years ago, you could see substitution effect. Then China may reduce the purchases, say from Canada, from Brazil, from Australia. So in the long run, this type of arrangement may not be good for global trade. But in the short term, definitely that's going to ease this tension.
Yeah, but I'm not sure whether that's going to happen.
Wait a second. What are those issues? There is nothing to do with, if China purchases more things from the U.S., it doesn't decrease inflation in China. That is absolutely false. That's an equivocation that doesn't exist. If the fact is China is going through this because the price of pork has gone up dramatically, buying from the U.S. at higher prices is not going to decrease that.
Basically, my concern is that, you know, there's still 3 or 4 weeks before any agreement is signed.
Yeah, mid-November.
Yeah, but could anything go wrong between now and then?
Yes. That
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically, but it's unlikely.
Why?
I think if you compare what's happening now and what's happened in May, when the trade deal collapsed, I think right now we only look at a few issues. Again, as I said, in May, I think the disagreement was just too wide. But that's not the case right now. I think both sides have realized, let's just get some easy wins and taking baby steps.
And Einar, your take?
And I say in 4 weeks, we will be sitting here wondering what happened to the deal.
Okay. But anyway, even if that is the case, even if the things is still going in the right direction, President Trump is still pretty far away from the goal that he set out, you know, by starting this trade war, right? At this moment, he only got China to buy the agricultural products that China stopped buying, were buying before.
Okay. No, I mean, Donald Trump set out a very high standard. He was going to literally make policy in Washington that Beijing would have to obey. He wanted to have people in Beijing who were actually monitoring what the Chinese were doing. This was impossible from day one. Even he knew that wasn't possible. But this was a delay tactic. He was always thinking that he would circle back at some point at the politically opportune time in order to try to propel his second presidency.
So just in the, I'm only talking about the most recent trade talk, and few issues, for example, industrial policies, subsidies, were not being addressed. I think both sides realize some of these issues, they need to be addressed gradually in the long run. And meanwhile, and market access, and China does show quite a significant improvement, again, in financial service. So I think if you look at the Chinese economy, I mean, it's of course very complicated. Where do you start? So it seems to me the consensus, if there's significant improvement on market access, I think both sides are getting closer.
And
what is the risk?
But you know, the point is that this is not a logical guy. He doesn't have a strategy. He doesn't seem to understand that tariffs are paid by the consumer, not by the country that sells the products. He doesn't seem to understand how the trade deficit works or anything like that, basic economics. So the idea that he's operating on a logical set of assumptions would seem to be fallacious.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see. There's no other way to predict the future with this presidency. Many thanks to my guests, Sitao, economist with Deloitte China, and Einar Tangen, a current affairs commentator. And you have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, the U.S. will vote on what it is calling a Uyghur human rights bill. How will this vote impact already fraught relations between China and the U.S.? What's the bigger picture in the region? Stay with us.